Isaiah Jackson had delivered thousands of packages, but this Tuesday morning was different. Walking into a Bellwood Hills mansion for a high-pay delivery, he froze in the sunlit conservatory. On an easel stood an elegant portrait of a young black woman wearing a gold necklace he'd seen his mother hide his entire life. The woman in the painting was unmistakably her, decades younger, but undeniably his mother. Isaiah's voice shook as he turned to the elderly white billionaire. "Sir, why is my mom's photo in your house?" The room went silent, the old man's face drained of color, and Isaiah realized he'd just asked a question that would unravel a secret buried for 20 years. What he didn't know was that some truths start wars even the powerful can't control. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The alarm clock screamed at 5 in the morning, dragging Isaiah out of a sleep that never felt long enough. He slapped the button with one tired hand and sat up in the darkness of his tiny bedroom. Through the paper-thin walls, he could hear his mother coughing in the next room. Each rasp made his chest tighten. Isaiah rubbed his face and stood, moving quietly through their small apartment. The place wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms in a building where the heat barely worked and the neighbors kept odd hours, but it was theirs. He peeked into his mother's room and found Renee sitting up against her pillows, reading by lamplight even at this ungodly hour. "You should be sleeping, Mama," Isaiah said softly from the doorway. Renee looked up and smiled, though he could see the exhaustion behind it. She was only 47 but looked older lately, worn down by long shifts as a hospital cleaner and whatever illness the doctors still couldn't quite name. "Says the boy who works 2 jobs and takes night classes," she replied. "Don't worry about me. I'll rest after you leave." Isaiah wanted to argue, but knew it would go nowhere. His mother had always been like this, proud and private, never asking for help even when she desperately needed it. He'd grown up watching her work herself to the bone, always with that quiet dignity she carried like armor. She never complained, never explained where she came from or why they had no other family. It was just the 2 of them against the world, and that had always been enough. Until recently, when a medical bill started piling up and enough stopped being enough. Isaiah kissed her forehead and headed out into the pre-dawn cold. His beat-up Honda Civic coughed to life on the 3rd try, and he drove through empty streets toward the distribution center. He'd been working for quick ship delivery for almost 2 years now, taking every shift he could get while trying to keep his college dreams alive. Business management classes twice a week at the community college, $15 textbooks bought used from seniors, essays written between deliveries and parking lots. It was exhausting, but he'd promised himself he'd build something better than this hand-to-mouth existence. The distribution center buzzed with activity even at this early hour. Drivers loaded vans, scanners beeped, and supervisors shouted instructions over the noise. Isaiah clocked in and grabbed his scanner, ready for another day of the same routine. "Jackson," his supervisor Marcus called him over, holding a tablet. "Got something different for you today." Isaiah walked over, curious. Marcus was a stocky white guy in his 50s who'd always been fair with him, never playing favorites but never cutting anyone slack either. "What's up?" "Last-minute delivery. Private estate out in Bellwood Hills. Big house, bigger money." Marcus lowered his voice. The system flagged it as executive-only delivery. Usually that means one of the senior guys handles it, but they're all tied up. Client specifically requested personal delivery inside the property. Pays triple the usual rate. Isaiah's eyes widened. Triple rate? That could cover his mother's prescription refill, and then some. Inside the property? Why? Marcus shrugged. "Rich people are weird. Maybe they don't trust us leaving packages at the gate. Maybe they like feeling important. Who knows? You interested or not? Package needs to be there by 9. Every instinct told Isaiah this was strange. In 2 years of deliveries, he'd never been asked to enter someone's home. Porches, lobbies, reception desks, sure. But inside? Still, triple pay was triple pay, and his mother needed her medicine. "I'll take it." Marcus handed him the tablet to sign off. "Keep it professional." Don't touch anything, don't ask questions, just deliver and leave. These Bellwood Hills types don't like their time wasted. Isaiah loaded the medium-sized package into his van and pulled up the address on his phone. Bellwood Hills. He'd driven through there once by accident and felt like he'd crossed into another country. Mansion set back from tree-lined streets, iron gates, security cameras everywhere. The kind of neighborhood where his beat-up van would probably trigger suspicious phone calls. The drive took 40 minutes through gradually nicer streets. The houses grew larger, the lawns more manicured, the cars more expensive. By the time Isaiah turned onto Willowbrook Lane, he felt completely out of place. His van rattled past houses that looked like museums, all old money and older trees. The address led him to a gate that looked like it belonged to a castle. Stone pillars rose on either side, connected by wrought iron twisted into elaborate patterns. A camera perched on one pillar swiveled to track his approach. Isaiah rolled down his window and pressed the call button on the intercom. "Quick ship delivery for Whitmore residents," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The intercom crackled. "Please wait." A minute later, it crackled again. "Drive through to the main house. Someone will meet you." The gates swung open silently, and Isaiah drove down a driveway that curved through perfectly maintained gardens. The house came into view gradually, and he had to remind himself to keep breathing. It wasn't just big. It was historical, the kind of place you'd see in movies about old American wealth. 3 stories of weathered brick and white columns, ivy climbing one wall, windows that probably cost more than his entire apartment building. He parked near the front steps, feeling ridiculous in his delivery uniform and scuffed sneakers. A man in a dark suit emerged from a side entrance, walking with the careful posture of professional security. He was white, middle-aged, with the build of someone who stayed in shape as part of his job. "You have a delivery for Mr. Whitmore?" the security guard asked. His tone was polite but distant, like Isaiah was a task to be completed. "Yes, sir. I was told to bring it inside." The guard nodded. "Mr. Whitmore requested personal delivery. Follow me, please. Don't wander, don't touch anything." Isaiah grabbed the package and followed the guard up the front steps. The door opened into an entrance hall that made his breath catch. Marble floors, a chandelier that probably weighed more than his car, a staircase that curved up to the second floor like something from a movie. Everything screamed money, old money, the kind that had been collecting and growing for generations. "This way," the guard said, leading him down a hallway lined with paintings. Landscapes, portraits of stern-looking white people in old-fashioned clothes, abstract pieces that Isaiah didn't understand. Their footsteps echoed on the polished floors. They passed through what looked like a library, shelves stretching to a high ceiling, leather furniture arranged near a fireplace big enough to stand in. Then through a sitting room with furniture that looked too fancy to actually sit on. This house felt like a museum where someone happened to live. Cold, beautiful, intimidating. The guard stopped at a doorway and gestured inside. "Mr. Whitmore is in the conservatory. You can leave the package on the table near the door." Isaiah stepped into a room flooded with morning light. Windows stretched from floor to ceiling on 3 sides, looking out onto gardens that rolled away into the distance. Plants in expensive pots lined the walls. The furniture here was lighter, less formal, like someone actually used this space. And then Isaiah saw him. The man stood near the far windows, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the grounds. He was old, probably in his 70s, with white hair and a posture that suggested he'd spent his whole life being obeyed. Even from behind, he radiated authority. This was Arthur Whitmore, though Isaiah didn't know the name yet. Just another rich white man in a house full of ghosts. Isaiah moved quietly toward the table the guard had indicated, not wanting to disturb whatever thoughts occupied the billionaire's mind. He set the package down carefully and was about to turn and leave when something caught his eye. An easel stood in a pool of sunlight near the center of the room. On it rested a large portrait, the kind you'd see in art galleries. The painting showed a black woman, maybe in her late 20s, sitting in a garden. She wore an elegant navy dress, and her hair was pulled back in a way that showed off high cheekbones and thoughtful eyes. A gold necklace rested at her throat, catching light in the painting just like it must have caught light when she posed for it. Isaiah froze. The delivery bag slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. He knew that face. He'd seen it every single day of his life. The woman in the portrait was his mother. Not as she looked now, tired and worn down by life, but younger, healthier, more alive. But it was her. The curve of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, the way her eyes held secrets she'd never tell. Even the necklace looked familiar, though he'd only seen it once, hidden in a box at the back of her closet when he was looking for old photos. Isaiah's heart pounded so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. His vision tunneled. Nothing existed except that portrait and the impossible fact of its existence. What was his mother doing on an easel in a billionaire's mansion? How did this man have her picture? Why had she never mentioned knowing anyone like this? Sir, the word came out strangled, barely above a whisper. Arthur Whitmore turned from the window. He was exactly what Isaiah expected, an elderly white man with the kind of face that came from generations of good breeding and better nutrition. Tailored clothes, expensive watch, that casual confidence of someone who'd never worried about money a day in his life. He glanced at Isaiah with mild curiosity, probably wondering why the delivery boy was still standing there. Then his gaze traveled to where Isaiah was staring. To the portrait. Something changed in Arthur's expression, a careful blankness sliding over his features like a mask. Sir, Isaiah said again, louder this time. His voice shook. Why is my mom's photo in your house? The room went absolutely silent. Even the sound from outside seemed to stop. The security guard stiffened in the doorway. Arthur Whitmore stood frozen, one hand still raised slightly from whatever gesture he'd been making. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Arthur's eyes shifted from the portrait to Isaiah's face. Really looked at him for the first time. Isaiah watched something flicker in those old eyes. Recognition? Fear? Something deeper and more complicated than either? Your mother, Arthur repeated quietly. Not a question. Not quite a statement either. Yes. Isaiah pointed at the portrait with a shaking hand. That's her. That's Renee. Renee Jackson. Why do you have her picture? Arthur's face had gone pale. He looked at the portrait like it was a wound that had never quite healed, then back at Isaiah with an expression Isaiah couldn't read. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither of them had words for yet. The security guard took a step forward. Sir, should I escort him out? Arthur raised one hand sharply, stopping the guard mid-step. It was the first real emotion Isaiah had seen from him, a crack in that billionaire composure. No, stay where you are. But, sir, I said stay. Arthur's voice carried weight that came from decades of being obeyed without question. The guard froze. Arthur turned back to Isaiah, and for the first time, there was something raw in his expression, something almost human beneath all that money and power. What? Arthur said slowly, carefully, is your mother's name? Renee Jackson, Isaiah repeated. His whole body trembled. Renee Marie Jackson. She's 47. She works at County General Hospital. She raised me by herself my whole life. And that's her picture right there. So you tell me how you have it and what it means. Arthur's hands shook. He clasped them together, but Isaiah saw it. Saw the way all color drained from the old man's face. Saw the way he had to steady himself against the window frame. Whatever Isaiah had stumbled into, it was bigger than a simple portrait, bigger than a coincidence. This was something that had been buried deliberately, and Isaiah had just kicked the grave open. Leave us, Arthur said to the security guard. Everyone, clear this room. Now. Sir, I don't think. Now. The word cracked like a whip. The guard hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and direct orders, then backed out of the room. Isaiah heard him speaking quietly into a radio, probably alerting other staff. But within moments, The sounds faded, and it was just Isaiah and Arthur Whitmore, staring at each other across a sunlit room that suddenly felt like a minefield. Arthur moved slowly to a chair and sat down heavily. He looked old suddenly, not just elderly but ancient, like those few words had aged him years and seconds. "Renee Marie," he repeated softly. "After all this time, you know her." It wasn't a question anymore. "I knew her." Arthur stared at the portrait. "A long time ago. She was the most important person in my life." Isaiah's mind reeled. His mother, who never talked about her past, who avoided questions about Isaiah's father, who lived like she was hiding from something. His mother had been important to a billionaire? Nothing about that made sense with a woman who'd raised him in tiny apartments, who'd worked cleaning jobs and never complained, who'd never had anything valuable except that one hidden necklace. "How?" Isaiah demanded. "How did you know her? Why does she never talk about you? Why do you have her portrait like she's someone you're mourning?" Arthur looked at him, then really looked, and Isaiah saw something break behind those old eyes. "I can't explain. Not all of it. Not yet. You better start trying. She worked for me once. She was brilliant, principled. She saw things clearly when everyone around me was blinded by money and power. She made me want to be better than I was." Arthur's voice cracked, and then she disappeared. Disappeared? Isaiah shook his head. "She didn't disappear. She's been right here, living 30 miles away, raising me. She's been here the whole time. I looked for her." Arthur's hands trembled in his lap. "I searched, but after a while, it became clear she didn't want to be found. And there were reasons, dangerous reasons. So I stopped. But I never forgot." Isaiah felt like the floor was tilting under his feet. "What reasons? What are you talking about?" "People in my world didn't like her influence. They saw her as a threat. When things escalated, when it became clear that staying close to me put her in danger, she chose to leave. I should have protected her. I should have fought for her. Instead, I let her go, and I've regretted it every day since." "You're lying." Isaiah's voice rose. "My mother never worked for anyone like you. She's a hospital cleaner. She's always been a hospital cleaner. She doesn't know billionaires. She doesn't know this world." Arthur stood slowly and walked to the portrait. He reached out one shaking hand, but didn't touch it, like he was afraid it might vanish if he did. "This necklace," he said quietly, tapping the painted gold at Renee's throat. "I had it made for her. Custom designed. One of a kind. Does she still have it?" Isaiah's mouth went dry. He thought of the box in his mother's closet, the one she thought he didn't know about. The one with a few old photos, some papers he'd never looked at closely, and yes, a gold necklace that she never wore, but never threw away either. "How do you know about that?" Isaiah whispered. "Because I gave it to her the night I asked her to stay." Arthur's voice broke, and she said she couldn't. She said staying would destroy us both. She was right, but I was too proud to admit it then. Isaiah backed up a step, then another. This couldn't be real. His mother's whole life, everything she'd told him and not told him, was built on some relationship with this man, some past she'd never mentioned. "I need to leave." "Wait." Arthur turned, reaching out. "Please. I know this is overwhelming, but if Renee is your mother, then I need to know how she is, where she is. I need to know she's safe." "Safe?" Isaiah laughed, and it came out bitter. "She's sick. She works herself to death trying to keep us afloat. She's not safe. She's barely surviving. And you're here in your mansion with her portrait like she's some memory you can just keep on display." Arthur flinched like he'd been slapped. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. If I'd known she was struggling." "You would have what? Sent money? Fixed everything? You're 30 years too late for that." Isaiah grabbed his delivery bag from the floor. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold it. "I'm leaving. I'm going home, and I'm going to ask my mother what the hell is going on, and you better hope she tells me something different than what I'm thinking right now." "Isaiah, wait. What do you know my name?" Isaiah froze. He'd never introduced himself. Arthur's face crumbled. "It's on your uniform. Your name tag." Isaiah looked down. "Right. Of course. But something about the way Arthur said it felt wrong. like he was covering for something else. Like maybe he'd known Isaiah's name before today. "Stay away from us," Isaiah said, backing toward the door. "Whatever you and my mother had, it's over. It's been over." She clearly wanted it that way. "Please." Arthur's voice was raw. "Just tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I should have done better. Tell her." But Isaiah was already walking away, past security guards who watched him with new interest, through hallways that felt like they were closing in, out into the bright morning air that did nothing to clear his head. He climbed into his van and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "How's your morning going, baby?" Isaiah stared at the message. How was his morning going? He'd just discovered his mother had some secret past with a billionaire. He'd seen her portrait in a mansion like she was royalty or property or both. He'd watched an old white man crumble at the mention of her name. He didn't text back. He started the van and drove, not back to the distribution center, but toward home, toward his mother, toward answers she'd spent his whole life avoiding. Behind him, in the mansion, Arthur Whitmore stood in the conservatory staring at the portrait of a woman he'd lost decades ago, and at the empty doorway where her son had just walked away. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and made a call. "I need you to find everything you can about Renee Jackson and her son Isaiah," he said quietly. "Everything. Where they live, how they're doing what they need. And do it quietly. No one can know." He hung up and returned to the portrait. "I should have protected you," he whispered to the painted face. "I should have been braver. I'm so sorry." The house settled into silence around him, full of secrets that wouldn't stay buried much longer. Isaiah burst into their apartment 2 hours later to find his mother folding laundry in the living room. She looked up with a smile that faded the moment she saw his face. "Isaiah, what's wrong? Why aren't you at work?" He pulled out his phone, hands still shaking, and showed her a photo he'd taken quickly in the conservatory. The portrait, her younger face, the necklace. Renee's composure shattered. The towel she'd been folding dropped to the floor. All the color drained from her face. She sat down hard on the couch, one hand pressed to her chest like she was having trouble breathing. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "A mansion in Bellwood Hills. A billionaire's house. Arthur Whitmore's house." Isaiah watched her flinch at the name. "You know him. You knew him. That's you in the painting, Mama. So you better start explaining because I just delivered a package and found out my whole life might be a lie." Renee stared at the photo, tears spilling down her cheeks. For a long moment, she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was so quiet Isaiah had to lean in to hear it. "I prayed you'd never find out about him." "Why? Who is he? How do you know him?" "It doesn't matter anymore." "It matters to me." Isaiah's voice cracked. "I just watched a stranger cry over your picture. I saw him shake when I said your name. What happened between you two?" Renee looked up at him, and Isaiah saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Fear. Real, deep fear. That man destroys lives, Isaiah. Even when he means well. Even when he thinks he's helping. Everything he touches turns complicated and dangerous. "So you did know him well." "I knew him." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "A long time ago, before you were born. We were close. Too close. And when I realized what staying in his world would cost, I left. I had to. Because of me?" Renee's silence was answer enough. Isaiah sat down next to her, his mind spinning. "Mama, what aren't you telling me? Everything that matters." She took his hand, squeezing it tight. "And I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll never go back to that house. Promise me you'll forget what you saw today. That man is part of a past I buried for good reasons. He knows my name. He has your portrait. He called you the most important person in his life. How am I supposed to forget that? You have to." Renee turned to face him fully, and there was steel in her voice now. "Isaiah, listen to me. I left that world to protect you. If you go digging into this, if you try to make sense of it, you'll open doors that should stay closed. Trust me. Please." But Isaiah was already seeing the pieces he'd been too young or too blind to notice before. The way his mother never talked about his father. The way she'd always worked jobs below her intelligence level, like she was hiding. The way she had no old friends, no family photos, no past that went back more than his lifetime. She'd been running from something, from someone, from Arthur Whitmore. That night, Isaiah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in that conservatory. Arthur's reaction when Isaiah said Renee's name. The way the old man had looked at the portrait like it physically hurt him. The trembling hands, the raw apology, and the way he'd known, without Isaiah saying it, that Renee had disappeared because of danger, that she'd left to protect someone. Isaiah pulled out his phone and started searching. Arthur Whitmore brought up hundreds of results. CEO of Whitmore Industries, a massive conglomerate involved in everything from real estate to technology. Net worth in the billions. Philanthropist, powerful enough to shape policy and public opinion. The kind of man who could make problems disappear. Or people. Isaiah searched deeper, looking for any mention of his mother's name. Nothing. He tried variations, maiden names, anything. Still nothing. Whatever connection they'd had, it had been scrubbed from public record so thoroughly it might as well have never existed. But it had existed. The portrait proved it. The necklace proved it. Arthur's reaction proved it. And Isaiah had a terrible suspicion about what it all meant. A suspicion his mother wouldn't confirm and Arthur hadn't quite denied. A suspicion that explained why Renee had run, why she'd hidden, why she'd raised Isaiah alone in poverty when one phone call to Arthur Whitmore could have solved every problem they'd ever had. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Isaiah almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Isaiah Jackson, a professional male voice, crisp and neutral. Who is this? My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm Mr. Whitmore's attorney. He's asked me to reach out to you discreetly. Isaiah sat up in bed. How did you get this number? Mr. Whitmore has resources. Please don't be alarmed. He simply wants to make sure you and your mother are well. He's prepared to offer financial assistance. No strings attached. We don't want his money. I understand this is difficult, but Mr. Whitmore is genuinely concerned. If your mother needs medical care, if there are bills that need paying, he wants to help. Why? Isaiah demanded. Why does he care? A pause on the other end. I think you know why. Say it. I want you to say it. That's between you, your mother, and Mr. Whitmore. I'm simply here to facilitate support if you'll accept it. Isaiah's grip on the phone tightened. Tell Mr. Whitmore to stay away from us. Tell him we don't need anything from him. Tell him he's 30 years too late to care. He hung up and immediately regretted it. Not because he wanted the money, but because he'd just confirmed that Arthur was right to keep searching. That Isaiah and Renee were worth finding. In his own bedroom across town, Arthur Whitmore sat in darkness, the lawyer's update echoing in his mind. Isaiah had refused help. Renee clearly wanted no contact, and yet Arthur couldn't let it go. Not when he'd finally found them. Not when he'd seen Isaiah's face and recognized features he knew too well. He pulled up the private investigation report he'd commissioned that afternoon. Photos of Isaiah at work, of Renee leaving their apartment building, information about her job, her medical situation, their financial struggles. Everything Arthur had missed while respecting Renee's choice to disappear. And there, in a sealed envelope attached to the report, were the results he'd requested. DNA analysis from a sample Isaiah had touched in a conservatory, a coffee cup or door handle, compared against Arthur's own genetic profile. Arthur's hands shook as he opened it, but he already knew what it would say. He'd known the moment he looked at Isaiah's face, seen Renee's features mixed with his own, seen the truth that had been hidden for 19 years. The document confirmed it with clinical precision. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. Arthur set the paper down and buried his face in his hands. He'd lost Renee because he'd been too weak to protect her from his own world. And now he'd lost 19 years with a son he'd never known existed. Years of birthdays and first days of school and all the moments that made a father necessary. Years when Renee struggled alone while he lived in luxury. never knowing he had a child growing up in poverty. "I should have protected you," he whispered again to the darkness. But it wasn't just Renee he'd failed this time. It was Isaiah too. And now that Isaiah knew enough to ask questions, now that the secret was cracking open, there would be consequences. Arthur's other children would find out eventually. His business rivals, the vultures who circled any sign of weakness in powerful families. The truth would come out, and when it did, it would tear everything apart. Arthur made another call, this one to his head of security. "I need protection for Renee Jackson and her son. Discreet, but constant. They're not to know about it, but I want them safe. Starting tonight." Because he'd failed them once by letting them go. He wouldn't fail them again by leaving them vulnerable to what was coming. In their small apartment, Renee couldn't sleep. She sat in her room holding the necklace Arthur had given her so long ago. The one she kept hidden but never sold no matter how desperate things got. The one that proved, more than any words, that what they'd shared had been real. She'd known this day might come eventually, known that Isaiah would ask questions as he got older. But she'd hoped for more time. Time to figure out how to explain. Time to prepare him for the truth that would change everything. Arthur Whitmore was Isaiah's father, and Isaiah deserved to know. But knowing would put him in danger, would make him a target for people who wouldn't want Arthur's legacy complicated by an illegitimate son, would pull him into a world that had almost destroyed Renee before she'd escaped. She'd run to protect him. She'd stayed hidden to keep him safe. And now, because of one delivery to the wrong house, everything she'd sacrificed might be for nothing. Renee closed her hand around the necklace and made a decision. She would tell Isaiah the truth. Not all of it, not yet, but enough that he'd understand why she'd kept him away from Arthur's world. Enough that he'd know the danger was real. And then she'd ask him to walk away, to let the past stay buried, to choose a simple, safe life over the complications that came with the Whitmore name. She just prayed he'd listen, because if he didn't, if he pushed too hard for answers, then everything she'd sacrificed would unravel. And she didn't know if any of them would survive what came next. After the confrontation with Arthur and the emotional conversation with his mother, Isaiah couldn't shake the feeling that he was living in someone else's story. The next morning, he called in sick to work, something he'd never done before, and sat at their small kitchen table with a laptop borrowed from a friend at school. If his mother wouldn't tell him everything, he'd find it himself. Renee had left early for her shift at the hospital, moving slowly like the weight of their conversation still pressed on her shoulders. Before she'd gone, she'd kissed his forehead and whispered, "Please be careful, baby. Some truths hurt more than lies." Isaiah started with what he knew. Arthur Whitmore, billionaire, CEO of Whitmore Industries. The search results painted a picture of American success, a self-made empire built on real estate development and tech investments. Except Arthur wasn't self-made at all. The deeper Isaiah dug, the more he found references to inherited wealth, old family money that went back generations. The Whitmores have been powerful since before the Civil War, their fortune built on everything from railroads to banking. He searched for any mention of his mother's name. Renee Jackson brought up nothing connected to Whitmore Industries. He tried variations, different spellings, maiden names his mother had mentioned once or twice in passing. Still nothing. It was like she'd been erased from history, scrubbed so completely that no trace remained. But people didn't just disappear from the internet. Not completely. Someone had worked hard to bury whatever connection existed between Renee and Arthur. Isaiah switched tactics and started searching old news articles from 20 to 25 years ago, around when his mother would have been in her 20s. He filtered for Whitmore Industries, looking for anything unusual. Scandals, lawsuits, business disputes. There were plenty, the kind of corporate drama that came with that much money and power, but nothing jumped out until he found a brief mention in a business journal from 1999. Whitmore Industries announces restructuring of executive advisory board. Several key positions eliminated following internal review. It was vague, the kind of corporate speak that meant nothing and everything. But the date caught Isaiah's attention. 1999. He would have been born in 2006, which meant this happened 7 years before his birth. He kept searching around that time period and found more references to corporate culture changes and strategic realignment. All careful language that suggested something bigger had happened behind closed doors. Then he found a photo. It was from a charity gala in 1998, a group shot of Whitmore Industries executives. Isaiah zoomed in, scanning faces, and there in the back row stood a young black woman in an elegant dress. The photo quality wasn't great, but Isaiah's heart started pounding. The posture, the way she held herself, it could have been his mother. The caption listed names, but didn't match them to faces. Just Whitmore Industries leadership and advisory team. Isaiah saved the photo and kept digging. An hour later, he found something that made his blood run cold. A sealed lawsuit from 2000, the details hidden behind legal privacy protections, but the parties were listed. Whitmore Industries versus Barrett Holdings. The summary mentioned defamation, corporate espionage, and breach of fiduciary duty. Isaiah searched for Barrett Holdings and found a company that had dissolved in 2001. But before that, they'd been major competitors to Whitmore Industries, focused on the same markets, the same deals. The lawsuit suggested Arthur had accused them of stealing information, of planting someone inside his company to undermine him. Was that what happened to his mother? Had she gotten caught in some corporate war? Isaiah's phone rang. Unknown number again. He hesitated, then answered. Hello. Isaiah, it's Thomas Brennan, Mr. Whitmore's attorney. Please don't hang up. I told you we don't want anything from him. I'm not calling about money. Mr. Whitmore would like to meet with you again. Just the two of you. No lawyers, no security. He says there are things you deserve to know. My mother told me to stay away from him. Understand. But Isaiah, whatever your mother told you about the danger, about why she left, it's more complicated than you think. Mr. Whitmore isn't the enemy here. He never was. Isaiah's grip tightened on the phone. Then who is? A pause. That's exactly what he wants to explain. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock, at the mansion. Or if you prefer, he'll meet you anywhere you choose. Somewhere public if that makes you more comfortable. Isaiah, he thought about his mother's warning, about the fear in her eyes. But he also thought about the portrait, the necklace, the way Arthur had looked at him like seeing a ghost. I'll come to the mansion. But if this is some kind of trap, it's not. You have my word. Mr. Whitmore just wants to give you the truth. After hanging up, Isaiah sat in silence. He should tell his mother about the meeting, should ask her permission. But he knew what she'd say. She'd tell him not to go, to let the past stay buried. And Isaiah couldn't do that. Not anymore. This was his history too, even if he'd never known it existed. That evening, when Renee came home exhausted from her shift, Isaiah didn't mention the call. Instead, he helped her make dinner and watched her move around their tiny kitchen, seeing her differently now. This woman who'd worked herself to exhaustion his whole life, who'd never asked for help, who'd built walls around her past so carefully that even her own son couldn't see through them. She'd done it all to protect him. But from what? The next evening, Isaiah drove back to Bellwood Hills. The gates opened for him this time without him having to announce himself. They'd been expecting him. He parked in the same spot as before and walked up the front steps, his heart hammering against his ribs. Thomas Brennan met him at the door, a white man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from handling other people's problems for a living. Isaiah, thank you for coming. Mr. Whitmore is in his study. I'll show you the way. Are you staying? Isaiah asked as they walked through the mansion. No, Mr. Whitmore was very clear. This conversation is private, but I'll be available if needed. Thomas stopped at a heavy wooden door and knocked once before opening it. Sir, Isaiah is here. The study was different from the conservatory. Darker, more intimate, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive desk that probably cost more than Isaiah's car. Arthur sat in a leather chair near a fireplace, a drink in his hand. He looked older than he had 3 days ago, like the weight of whatever he was about to say had aged him overnight. Isaiah. Arthur stood slowly. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Isaiah sat in the chair across from him, keeping his back straight and his expression neutral. Your lawyer said you wanted to explain things. Edo. But first, I need you to understand something. Everything I'm about to tell you, your mother kept from you because she thought it would keep you safe. She made choices I didn't agree with, but they came from love. Whatever anger you feel after this, please remember that. Just tell me the truth. Arthur took a long breath and set his drink down. Your mother and I met in 1997. She was 22, fresh out of graduate school, with a business degree and ideas that terrified everyone around her. She applied for an analyst position at Whitmore Industries, and I hired her despite my board objections. Why did they object? Because she was young, black, and a woman in a world dominated by old white men. Because she had the audacity to suggest that companies like mine were built on exploitation and needed fundamental restructuring. Because she scared them. Arthur smiled slightly. She scared me too, but in a different way. She made me question everything I'd accepted my whole life. Isaiah listened, trying to reconcile this description with the quiet woman who'd raised him. Within a year, she'd moved from analyst to advisor. She had access to everything, every deal, every decision. And she used that access to push me toward better practices. Fair wages, environmental responsibility, ethical sourcing. The board hated her. My business partners saw her as a liability. But I listened because she was right and because I was falling in love with her. The words hung in the air between them. Isaiah's throat tightened. We tried to keep it professional. We tried to pretend what we felt wasn't real. But by 1998, we'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. We weren't just colleagues anymore. We were partners. In business and in life, even if we couldn't make it public. I was married at the time, though it was a marriage in name only by then. Your mother and I talked about the future, about building something together once I could extricate myself from my circumstances. But that didn't happen, Isaiah said quietly. No, because Barrett Holdings, one of our biggest competitors, saw an opportunity. They saw that Renee had influence over me, and they tried to use her. They approached her with offers, threatened to expose our relationship if she didn't provide inside information. When she refused, they went after her directly. Rumors started spreading that she was manipulating me, that she was unqualified, that she'd slept her way to power. None of it was true, but the damage was done. Arthur's hands clenched into fists. I should have defended her publicly. Should have stood up and told everyone the truth. But I was a coward. I worried about the company's reputation, about my own position. I let the board pressure me into distancing myself from her professionally. I thought I was protecting her by keeping quiet, but I was really just protecting myself. So she left, Isaiah said. So she left. But not before she did something extraordinary. She discovered that Barrett Holdings wasn't just spreading rumors. They were engaged in actual corporate espionage, and they planted someone inside Whitmore Industries to sabotage deals. Renee found the evidence and handed it to me. That lawsuit you probably found online, that was her gift to me. She saved my company, and then she walked away. Isaiah felt like he was hearing about a stranger. Why didn't she tell me any of this? Because it gets worse. Arthur stood and walked to the window, his back to Isaiah. After she left, I tried to find her. I hired investigators, pulled strings, used every resource I had. And what I discovered terrified me. Barrett Holdings didn't just want to hurt my company. They wanted to destroy anyone close to me. They put hits out on people they saw as threats. When I realized Renee was in danger because of me, because of what she'd done, I made a choice. He turned back to Isaiah. I stopped looking. I let her disappear. I used my connections to bury any trace of her existence in my life, scrubbed records, paid off anyone who knew about our relationship. I made her invisible, thinking that would keep her safe. And it worked. Barrett Holdings eventually collapsed under the weight of their own corruption. The threats faded. But by then, Renee was gone, and I had no way to find her without undoing all the protections I'd put in place. Until I showed up at your door, Isaiah said. Until you showed up at my door. Arthur's eyes glistened. And I saw your face, and I knew immediately. Knew that Renee hadn't just disappeared. She'd been carrying a secret that changed everything. The room felt too small suddenly. Isaiah stood, pacing to the fireplace and back. You're saying she got pregnant and never told you. I'm saying she left before either of us knew. And when she realized, she made the choice to raise you alone rather than bring you into a world that had nearly killed her. That's not fair. Isaiah's voice cracked. She struggled. We struggled. We lived in apartments where the heat didn't work, where I could hear rats in the walls. She worked jobs that destroyed her body. And you were here, in this mansion, with resources that could have changed everything. How is that protecting us? It's not. Arthur's voice broke. It's not fair, and it's not right, and I've carried that guilt every day since I stopped looking for her. But Isaiah, I didn't know about you. If I had known, I would have found a way. I would have risked everything to make sure you and your mother were safe and cared for. You expect me to believe that? You already proved you'd choose your company over her. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Arthur flinched but didn't argue. You're right. I made that choice once, and it was the worst mistake of my life. I lost the woman I loved because I was too weak to fight for her. I won't make that mistake again. Isaiah wanted to scream, to rage, to break something. Instead, he just stood there, shaking. Say it. Say what we're both thinking. Arthur met his eyes. You're my son, Isaiah. Biologically, legally, in every way that matters except the paperwork. I had the DNA test run. I know it's true, and I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you grew up without a father, without resources, without knowing you came from something more than struggle. I can't change the past, but I can try to fix the present. I don't want your money, Isaiah said. I'm not offering money. I'm offering truth, recognition, a chance to know where you came from. And yes, if you'll let me, I'd like to help. Your mother's medical bills, your college tuition, a life where you don't have to work yourself to death before you're even 20. That's not charity. That's me trying to be the father I should have been from the beginning. Isaiah sank back into the chair, his legs suddenly weak. Does she know? Does my mother know you know about me? Not yet. I want to talk to you first. This is your life, Isaiah. Your choice. If you want me to stay away, if you want to pretend this conversation never happened, I'll respect that. But if you want answers, if you want to understand where you came from and what that means, I'm here. I'm ready. And I'm not going anywhere this time. The fire crackled in the silence. Isaiah thought about his mother, working her shift at the hospital right now, probably exhausted, probably in pain. He thought about all the times they'd scraped by, all the nights she'd skipped dinner so he could eat, all the sacrifices she'd made because some billionaire had been too cowardly to protect her 20 years ago. I need time, Isaiah finally said. I need to talk to my mother. She deserves to know what you told me. Of course. Take all the time you need. Arthur walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. But before you go, you should have this. It's everything I could gather about what happened back then. Copies of the lawsuit, evidence of the threats, documentation of how I tried to protect her. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to understand. Isaiah took the folder with numb hands. You already have other children, other heirs. They're not going to be happy about me. No, they're not. But that's my problem to handle, not yours. Except it becomes my problem when they come after me. Isaiah stood. My mother warned me that you destroy lives even when you mean well. I'm starting to understand what she meant. Arthur's face crumbled. Isaiah, I'll be in touch. Maybe. I don't know yet. Isaiah walked to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I believe you loved her. I can see it. But love isn't enough when you're too afraid to fight for it. He left Arthur standing in the study, surrounded by wealth and power and a lifetime of regrets. The drive home passed in a blur. Isaiah pulled into their apartment complex and sat in his car, staring at the folder Arthur had given him. Inside was proof of everything. The relationship, the threats, the corporate warfare that had torn his family apart before he was even born. Evidence that his existence had been buried deliberately, not out of shame, but out of fear. and a letter. Isaiah found it tucked into the back of the folder, handwritten on expensive stationery. The date at the top was from 2000, just months after Renee had disappeared. My dearest Renee, it began. I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you're safe, or if you hate me, or if you've moved on to a life that doesn't include the disaster I created. But I need you to know that letting you go was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every instinct told me to find you, to bring you back, to damn the consequences and fight for what we had. But the threats were real. The danger was real. And the thought of you being hurt because of me was more than I could bear. So I made you invisible. I buried every trace, paid off every connection, did everything I could to make sure no one could ever find you through me. I tell myself it was the right choice. I tell myself you're somewhere safe, somewhere happy, somewhere far from the poison of my world. But God, Renee, I miss you. I miss your laugh and your fire and the way you challenged me to be better than I was. I hope wherever you are, you've found peace. And if you're reading this someday, know that I never stopped loving you. I never will. Always yours, Arthur. Isaiah's hand shook as he read the last line again. Arthur had loved her, genuinely, deeply, in a way that made him give her up rather than risk her life. It didn't make up for the years of struggle, didn't erase the poverty or the pain, but complicated the anger Isaiah wanted to feel. He found his mother in the kitchen making tea. She looked up when he walked in, saw his face, and immediately knew. You went back, she said quietly. He told me everything. About Barrett Holdings, about the threats, about why you left. Isaiah set the folder on the table. And about me. Renee's cup clattered against the counter. Isaiah, he's my father. Arthur Whitmore is my father. And you never told me. The words hung between them like an accusation and a plea. Renee's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to protect you. From what? From knowing where I came from? From having a father? From becoming a target? Renee's voice broke. Isaiah, you don't understand what that world is like. The people Arthur dealt with, the enemies he made, they would have seen you as leverage, a way to control him. I couldn't risk that. I couldn't risk you growing up looking over your shoulder, wondering if someone might use you to hurt him or use him to hurt you. So instead, I grew up poor, watching you kill yourself to keep us afloat, never understanding why we had nothing when apparently my father is a billionaire. Isaiah's voice rose. Do you know how many times I wondered why I didn't have a dad? How many times I asked you and you changed the subject? You let me think I wasn't wanted when the truth was you kept me from him. He didn't know. Renee shouted back. I left before I knew I was pregnant. And when I found out, I made the choice not to tell him, because staying connected to Arthur meant staying connected to danger. I chose your life over his money, Isaiah. I chose your safety over my pride. And I'd do it again. Isaiah sank into a chair. He wants to help. He wants to pay for your medical bills, my college, everything. He says it's not charity. It's him being the father he should have been. And what did you tell him? I told him I needed to talk to you first. Isaiah looked up at her. But Mama, he showed me proof. The threats were real. He did try to protect you. And he spent 20 years thinking you hated him when really you were protecting his child. Don't you think he deserves to know you didn't just run away? That you ran away for us? Renee sat down across from him, suddenly looking older than her 47 years. If I let him back into our lives, everything changes. His other children will find out. They'll see you as a threat to their inheritance. Arthur's enemies might resurface. We'll become public, Isaiah. Your whole life will become public. Are you ready for that? I don't know, but I know I'm tired of pretending. Tired of living in the shadows of decisions you made before I was born. I deserve to know who I am, where I come from. And yeah, maybe that comes with complications, but at least it's the truth. Renee reached across the table and took his hand. You're right. You do deserve the truth. And if you want a relationship with Arthur, I won't stop you. But please be careful. Power changes people. And Arthur has more power than almost anyone in this city. He still loves you, Isaiah said softly. I saw it. He kept your portrait all these years. He wrote you letters. He never moved on. A tear rolled down Renee's cheek. Some loves don't get happy endings. Some loves are too complicated for the real world. Or maybe some loves deserve a second chance. That night, Isaiah texted Thomas Brennan a single message. I want to meet with Arthur again. But this time my mother comes too. The response came within minutes. When and where? Tomorrow. The mansion. Noon. We'll be ready. Isaiah set his phone down and stared at the ceiling. In less than 24 hours, his mother would face the man she'd run from 2 decades ago. The man she'd loved enough to sacrifice everything for. The man who was Isaiah's father. And whatever happened next would change all their lives forever. In his study, Arthur read the message from his lawyer and closed his eyes. Renee was coming. After 20 years of silence, of wondering, of regret, he would see her again. And this time, he wouldn't let fear make his decisions. This time, he would fight for his family, even if it cost him everything else. The reunion between Arthur and Renee happened in the same conservatory where Isaiah had first seen her portrait. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching dust motes in the air as mother and son walked into the room together. Arthur stood near the portrait, his back straight despite his age, hands clasped in front of him like he was bracing for impact. When Renee stepped into view, Arthur's composure shattered. His hands dropped to his sides. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He just stared at her, drinking in the sight of someone he'd thought lost forever. Renee stopped a few feet away, her own eyes glistening. She was older now, worn by years of hard work and worry. But Arthur looked at her like she was still the brilliant 20-something who'd challenged his entire worldview. "Hello, Arthur," she said quietly. "Renee." His voice broke on her name. "I never thought I'd see you again. I didn't think you'd want to. Arthur took a shaky step forward, then stopped himself. "I've spent 20 years wondering if you were safe, if you were happy, if you hated me for not being strong enough to protect you. I never hated you." Renee's voice was soft but steady. "I was angry for a long time. Angry that you chose your company over us. But I understood why. You were trying to survive in a world that would have destroyed anyone who showed weakness." Isaiah stood back, watching his parents navigate this minefield of old pain and older love. It felt surreal, seeing them in the same room, speaking words that had probably lived in their heads for decades. Arthur gestured to chairs arranged near the windows. "Please, seat. We have a lot to talk about." They sat, the three of them forming an awkward triangle. Arthur looked at Isaiah, then back at Renee. "He told you what I said, about the threats, about why I stopped looking." "He did, and I believe you thought you were protecting me. But Arthur, you have to understand what that protection cost. I raised our son alone. I worked jobs that broke my body. I watched him go without things he needed because I was too proud to ask for help and too afraid to reach out to you. I would have helped if I'd known, but you didn't know, and that's on both of us. I made the choice not to tell you I was pregnant. I made the choice to disappear completely. I thought I was protecting Isaiah from your world, from the danger and the complications. Maybe I was wrong. You weren't wrong." Arthur's voice was firm. The threats were real. Bear Holdings had connections to people who didn't hesitate to hurt families. You did what you had to do. And now, Renee looked at him directly. Now those threats are gone. Barrett collapsed years ago. But here we are. Our son knows the truth. What happens next? Arthur turned to Isaiah. "What do you want to happen?" Isaiah had thought about this question all night. "I want to know you. I want to understand where I came from. But I don't want to be your secret or your project. If I'm your son, then I'm your son. Not something you hide or fix quietly. I have no intention of hiding you." Arthur's jaw set. "I'm prepared to acknowledge you publicly, to change my will, to ensure you're provided for, to give you the recognition you deserve." "Your other children won't like that," Renee said. "My other children have had every advantage their entire lives. They'll adjust." The words sounded confident, but Isaiah caught the flicker of worry in Arthur's eyes. The old man knew this would cause problems. He was choosing to face them anyway. They talked for 2 more hours, navigating questions and answers that had waited decades. Arthur told stories about Renee's time at Whitmore Industries, the brilliant strategies she'd developed, the way she'd challenged assumptions no one else dared question. Renee shared carefully edited versions of raising Isaiah, the proud moments and the struggles. Isaiah listened to both of them, piecing together a history he'd never known existed. By the time they left, something had shifted, not fixed, not healed, but acknowledged. Arthur walked them to their car, and for the first time, he hugged his son. It was awkward and brief, but real. "I meant what I said," Arthur told Isaiah. "I'm going to make this right." Isaiah nodded, not trusting his voice. As they drove away, he watched the mansion shrink in the rearview mirror and wondered what making it right would actually cost. The answer came faster than any of them expected. 3 days later, Isaiah's supervisor at QuickShip called him into the office. Marcus looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact as Isaiah sat down. "Look, kid, this isn't personal. Orders came from corporate. They're letting you go." Isaiah's stomach dropped. "What? Why? I haven't missed shifts, haven't had complaints." "I know. That's why this doesn't make sense to me either. But they said they're restructuring, eliminating some positions. Yours is one of them." Marcus slid a folder across the desk. 2 weeks severance. "I'm sorry." Isaiah walked out in a daze. He'd worked at QuickShip for almost 2 years without a single problem. Restructuring was corporate speak for something else, and he had a sinking feeling he knew what that something was. The next blow came 2 days later. A notice taped to their apartment door. Rent was increasing by $400 a month, effective immediately. The landlord claimed it was market adjustment, but Isaiah had lived there long enough to know the building never made improvements and rarely raised rent more than $50 at a time. Renee found the notice when she got home from work. She stared at it for a long moment before setting it on the kitchen table. "This is starting," she said quietly. "Starting what?" "The pressure. The quiet war." She sat down heavily. "They're coming after us, Isaiah. Whoever Arthur's children are, whoever doesn't want you in the picture, they're making their move." "How do they even know about me?" Arthur said he'd handle telling them. "Information like this doesn't stay secret. Someone on his staff probably talked, or someone saw us at the mansion. It doesn't matter how. What matters is they know, and they're trying to push us out before Arthur can make anything official." Isaiah wanted to argue, to say she was being paranoid, but he couldn't. The timing was too perfect. The coincidences too convenient. The third hit came online. Isaiah woke up one morning to texts from friends asking if he'd seen what people were posting about his mother. He searched her name and found his stomach turning. Old rumors, gossip from 20 years ago, had been resurrected and amplified. Posts calling Renee a gold digger, claiming she'd trapped Arthur Whitmore, suggesting Isaiah was trying to scam his way into a fortune. The posts were anonymous but coordinated, appearing across multiple platforms within hours of each other. They included details only someone with access to old Whitmore Industries records would know. Someone was weaponizing Renee's past against them. Renee saw the posts and went pale. She didn't cry or rage. She just closed her eyes and took a deep breath, like she'd been expecting this. "Call Arthur," she said. "Tell him what's happening." Isaiah called Thomas Brennan instead, figuring the lawyer could get to Arthur faster. Thomas listened grimly and said he'd handle it. An hour later, Arthur called directly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think they'd move this fast." Arthur's voice was tight with anger. "My eldest son, Marcus Whitmore, has been making calls. I just found out he's hired investigators to dig into both of you. The job loss, the rent increase, the online attacks, it's all him." "Can you stop him?" Isaiah asked. "I'm working on it." "But Isaiah, you need to understand something. Marcus doesn't just want to protect his inheritance. He wants to prove you're a fraud. He's filing a legal challenge claiming the DNA evidence was manufactured." "That's insane. You had it done by independent labs." "He doesn't care about truth. He cares about winning. And he has resources." Arthur paused. "My attorney is advising you and Renee not to engage publicly. Don't respond to the posts. Don't give interviews. Let us handle this legally." While they destroy my mother's reputation, Isaiah's voice rose. While they push us out of our home and take away our income, I'll cover your expenses, your rent, your mother's medical bills, whatever you need. You won't suffer financially while we fight this. I don't want your money. I want them to leave us alone. That's not going to happen. Not until we settle this definitively. Arthur's voice softened. Isaiah, I know this isn't what you wanted, but they see you as a threat, and threats get eliminated. The only way through this is to fight back. After hanging up, Isaiah found his mother sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't drunk. He wants to fight them in court, Isaiah told her. Of course he does. That's his world. Legal battles, PR campaigns, money against money. But Isaiah, we're not built for that kind of war. We don't have lawyers on retainer or PR teams cleaning up our image. We're just people trying to live our lives. Then what do? Renee looked up at him with tired eyes. We survive, like we always have. We keep our heads down, we ignore the noise, and we remember who we are regardless of what they say about us. But surviving got harder. Isaiah applied to 15 jobs over the next week and got rejection after rejection, often without explanation. His mother's hours at the hospital got cut mysteriously. Bills started piling up faster than they could pay them, and Arthur's offers of financial help felt like accepting defeat. Then Renee collapsed at work. Isaiah got the call from County General around 3 in the afternoon. His mother had been cleaning a patient room when she'd suddenly gone down, unconscious before she hit the floor. The hospital staff rushed her to the ER, and by the time Isaiah arrived, she was awake but weak, hooked up to monitors that beeped steadily. "Baby," she said when she saw him. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I am okay. Just overdid it." The doctor pulled Isaiah aside. "Your mother's condition has deteriorated significantly. The stress she's under isn't helping. She needs rest, reduced work hours, and honestly, she needs to see a specialist we can't provide here. There's a treatment option that might help, but it's expensive and not covered by our current insurance." How expensive? The number the doctor quoted made Isaiah's head spin. There was no way they could afford it. Not without help. Not without Arthur. Isaiah sat by his mother's bedside, holding her hand. She'd fallen asleep, exhausted by her own body's rebellion. He thought about everything that had led to this moment. The portrait, the revelation, the war that had erupted from one simple question about why his mother's face hung in a billionaire's mansion. His phone buzzed. "Arthur, I just heard. Is she okay?" She collapsed. "They say it's stress and her condition getting worse. She needs treatment we can't afford. Give me the hospital information. I'll handle it." "Arthur, I can't keep taking your money. That's exactly what your son is saying we're doing. That we're scamming you. I don't care what Marcus says. Renee is sick because of stress my family caused. Let me help. Please." Isaiah looked at his mother, so small in the hospital bed. "Okay, but this doesn't mean I'm backing down. I'm not disappearing just because your children don't like me. I wouldn't ask you to. In fact, I'm about to do something that's going to make things much worse before they get better." "What?" "I'm issuing a public statement, confirming you're my son, explaining what happened 20 years ago, making it clear that anyone who targets you or Renee answers to me directly." Isaiah's breath caught. "That's going to start a war. The war already started. I'm just making sure everyone knows which side I'm on." The statement went live that evening. Arthur Whitmore, one of the most powerful businessmen in the state, confirming he had a son he'd never known about, explaining the circumstances without pointing fingers, but making it clear Isaiah and Renee deserved respect and privacy. The media exploded. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Isaiah's phone started ringing nonstop. Reporters, distant relatives he didn't know existed, people from high school wanting to reconnect. He turned it off and focused on his mother, who woke briefly to see the news coverage on the hospital TV. "He really did it," she whispered. "He chose to fight. He chose us." Isaiah corrected. "I hope he knows what he started." So did Isaiah. Because within 24 hours of Arthur's statement, Marcus Whitmore filed a lawsuit challenging his father's mental competency. The claim argued that Arthur was being manipulated by a woman from his past and her opportunity. Arthur sat and looked at Renee's sleeping face. She was always so strong, so determined. I hated seeing her struggle back then, and I hate it even more now knowing I could have prevented it. You couldn't have known she was pregnant. I should have fought harder to find her. Should have risked the danger rather than assuming distance was protection. Arthur reached out, almost touching Renee's hand, then stopped himself. I made so many mistakes. With her, with you, even with my other children. I built an empire, but lost my family in the process. Your children are trying to take that empire. Let them try. I've already set things in motion they don't know about. Old clauses in the company charter, provisions I put in place years ago in case my heirs ever became the kind of people who valued money over decency. If they want to fight dirty, they'll discover I prepared for that possibility. Renee's eyes fluttered open. She saw Arthur and, for a moment, looked confused. Then recognition settled in, followed by something softer. You came. Of course I came. How are you feeling? Tired, but better than I was. She glanced at Isaiah, then back at Arthur. Your children are circling. They're not going to stop. Neither am I. Arthur finally took her hand, and Renee didn't pull away. I let you go once because I was afraid. I won't make that mistake again. Whatever happens with the company, with the money, with any of it, you and Isaiah are my priority now. Even if it costs you everything else. Everything else doesn't matter without you. Isaiah watched them. These two people whose love had been interrupted by circumstance and fear, finding their way back to each other across decades of distance. It was bittersweet, beautiful, and sad at the same time. A nurse came in to check Renee's vitals, and Arthur stepped back. I should go. Let you rest. But Renee, there's something you should know. I've scheduled a legal hearing. Everything's coming out. The truth about what happened 20 years ago, the evidence of threats, all of it. My lawyers think transparency is our best defense. Renee's eyes widened. Arthur, that means... It means the world will know our story. Your name will be public. The past we both try to bury will be front-page news. I know that's not what you wanted, but it's the only way to protect Isaiah. To prove he's not a fraud or a scam artist. He deserves the truth to be known. When? Next week. I wanted to tell you before it became public. Arthur looked at Isaiah. You'll probably have to testify. Are you ready for that? Isaiah thought about everything they'd been through in just a few weeks. The discovery, the threats, the attacks, watching his mother collapse under the weight of it all. I'm ready. Whatever it takes to end this. That night, Arthur sat in his study with his attorney, reviewing the strategy for the hearing. If we do this, Thomas warned, there's no going back. Your entire private life becomes public record. Every mistake, every secret, everything you've spent decades protecting. I know, but my son is being attacked because I wasn't brave enough to claim him when I should have. Renee spent 20 years in hiding because I wasn't strong enough to protect her. I'm done letting fear make my decisions. The board won't like it. Your children will fight harder. Let them. I'm activating the forfeiture clause. Thomas looked up sharply. Arthur, that's nuclear. If you can prove malicious action by your heirs, they lose everything. But you need solid evidence. We have it. Mark is hiring investigators to harass Isaiah and Renee. The coordinated online attacks. The suspicious timing of the job loss and rent increase. It's all documented. He thought he was being clever, keeping his hands technically clean, but his lawyers left a trail. If you do this, you're essentially disinheriting your own children. I'm holding them accountable. There's a difference. Arthur closed the folder. My father believed legacy was about money and power, but real legacy is about character. If my children can't show basic human decency, they don't deserve what I've built. And Isaiah? Arthur was quiet for a moment. Isaiah gets a choice. He could take a role in the company if he wants it, or he can have the resources to build his own path. But the foundation, the charitable work, the part of my empire that actually does good in the world, that goes to him. Because I trust him to use it wisely. You barely know him. I know he spent 19 years watching his mother struggle and never once blamed her for the choices she made. I know he walked away from my money when it would have solved all his problems because he has principles. That's more than I can say for the children I raised in luxury. Arthur stood, set up the hearing. It's time to finish this. The news of the upcoming hearing sent shockwaves through financial circles. Whitmore Industries' stock fluctuated wildly as investors speculated about the outcome. Media camped outside the courthouse. Arthur's children scrambled to mount their defense, while Arthur methodically prepared to dismantle it. And in a hospital room across town, Renee held her son's hand and tried to prepare him for what was coming. When we walk into that courtroom, everything changes. Our private pain becomes public entertainment. Are you sure you want this? Isaiah thought about the question, really thought about it. He could walk away, could take whatever settlement Arthur offered and disappear back into anonymity, could let the billionaires fight among themselves while he and his mother built a quiet life somewhere else. But that would mean letting Marcus win, letting the people who'd attack them face no consequences, letting Arthur fight alone after the old man had finally chosen to stand up for what was right. I'm sure, Isaiah said. We finish this together. Renee nodded, tears in her eyes. Then we finish it, and whatever happens next, we face it as a family. All three of us. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. 7 days for the lawyers to prepare, for the media to build anticipation, for Arthur's children to mount their final assault. 7 days until the truth came out and the Whitmore family's secrets became public record. 7 days until Isaiah's life changed forever, one way or another. The courthouse was a circus. News vans lined the street, reporters jockeyed for position on the steps, and photographers pushed against barriers trying to get clear shots of anyone entering the building. Isaiah had never seen anything like it. He walked beside his mother, both of them dressed in their best clothes, which still felt inadequate compared to the expensive suits surrounding them. Arthur arrived separately with his legal team, a wall of lawyers and assistants creating a buffer between him and the media. He looked older than Isaiah had ever seen him, the weight of what was about to happen visible in every line of his face. Their eyes met across the courthouse lobby, and Arthur nodded once. A promise. They were in this together. Marcus Whitmore sat on the opposite side of the courtroom with his siblings, two brothers who looked like younger versions of Arthur, and a sister whose expression radiated contempt. They dressed for battle too, designer everything, projecting wealth and legitimacy. When Marcus saw Isaiah, his lip curled. To him, Isaiah wasn't a brother. He was an obstacle to be removed. The hearing wasn't a trial exactly, more of a legal proceeding to determine facts. Arthur's mental competency, Isaiah's legitimacy, the validity of claims on both sides. But it felt like a trial, with judges presiding and lawyers ready to tear into anyone who took the stand. Isaiah was called first. He walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. He looked out at the packed courtroom and saw his mother in the front row, her hands clasped tight in her lap. Arthur's attorney, Thomas Brennan, started with gentle questions. Basic facts. Isaiah's name, age, occupation, where he grew up, how he'd been raised. Tell us about your mother, Thomas said. What kind of woman is Renee Jackson? Isaiah took a breath. She's the strongest person I know. She worked multiple jobs my whole life to make sure I had what I needed. She never complained, never asked for help, never made me feel like we were struggling even when we were. She taught me about dignity and hard work and being grateful for what you have. Did she ever mention Arthur Whitmore during your childhood? No, never. I didn't know he existed until 3 weeks ago when I delivered a package to his mansion. And what did you find there? A portrait of my mother, painted when she was younger, wearing a necklace I'd seen her hide in a box at home. I asked Mr. Whitmore why he had her picture, and everything changed. Thomas walked Isaiah through the discovery, the conversations, the revelation of paternity. Isaiah spoke clearly, honestly, not hiding his initial anger or confusion. He explained how his mother had begged him to stay away, how Arthur had offered help, how the attack started almost immediately after Arthur's public statement. My job was terminated without explanation. Our rent jumped $400 overnight. Someone posted lies about my mother online, calling her names, saying we were scammers. All of it happened within days of Arthur acknowledging me as his son. Do you know who was behind these attacks? I didn't at first, but the timing made it obvious. Someone didn't want me in the picture. Marcus's attorney stood for cross-examination. He was a sharp-faced white man with expensive glasses and a voice like ice. Mr. Jackson, isn't it convenient that you appeared in Arthur Whitmore's life just as your family faced financial difficulties? I didn't appear in his life. I delivered a package to his house. That's my job, a job that paid triple the normal rate, directly to a mansion you'd never been to before. Quite a coincidence. I didn't know whose house it was. I just needed the money. For your mother's medical bills, correct? Bills you couldn't afford. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Yes, my mother is sick. We couldn't afford her treatment. That's not a crime, but it is a motive, a reason to suddenly claim connection to a billionaire. I'm not claiming anything. DNA doesn't lie. The attorney smiled coldly. We'll get to that. Tell me, Mr. Jackson, before 3 weeks ago, had you ever researched the Whitmore family? Looked up their wealth? Studied how to approach them? No, I'd never heard of them. Never, never. And yet you expect us to believe that you just happened to deliver a package to Arthur Whitmore's home, just happened to see a portrait of your mother, and just happened to be his long-lost son. That's quite a series of coincidences. It's the truth. Or it's an elaborate scheme cooked up by a desperate young man and his mother who knew Arthur Whitmore decades ago and saw an opportunity. Thomas objected. The judge sustained it. But the damage was done. The attorney had planted doubt, made Isaiah sound calculating, made this look like a con instead of a discovery. Isaiah stepped down feeling shaken. His mother reached for his hand as he sat beside her, squeezing tight. You did well, she whispered. Just tell the truth. That's all we can do. Renee was called next. She walked to the stand with her head high, that quiet dignity Isaiah had known his whole life on full display. She answered questions about her past, her relationship with Arthur, why she'd left. I was pregnant and scared. Arthur's world was dangerous. People had already threatened me, tried to use me against him. I knew if I stayed, if I had his child in that environment, we'd become targets forever. So I left. I changed my name, moved away, and raised Isaiah alone. Why didn't you tell Arthur you were pregnant? Thomas asked. Because telling him meant staying connected, meant he'd try to help, which meant we'd never be truly safe. I chose my son's safety over everything else. Do you regret that choice? Renee looked directly at Arthur. I regret that Isaiah grew up without a father. I regret that Arthur missed 19 years with his son. But I don't regret keeping him safe. I'd make the same choice again if I had to. Marcus's attorney went after her hard, questioned her employment history, her finances, implied she'd been planning this reunion for years, suggested the old relationship with Arthur was a fabrication, that she'd been a minor employee who'd built up the connection in her mind. You claim Arthur Whitmore is Isaiah's father, but you've lived 30 miles away for 2 decades. Why not reach out before? Why wait until you were facing medical bills you couldn't pay? I didn't reach out. Isaiah found Arthur by accident. So you say, but you kept a necklace Arthur allegedly gave you. You told Isaiah stories that made him curious. You set the stage for this discovery. I kept a necklace because it reminded me of a time when I was happy. I never told Isaiah about Arthur. I actively tried to keep them apart. Yet here we are. Renee's voice hardened. Yes, here we are. Because my son asked questions I couldn't avoid anymore. Because he deserved to know the truth. Not for money. Not for some scheme. For truth. The DNA evidence came next. Independent lab results, presented by experts who explained the testing process. Probability of paternity exceeded 99.9%. The science was irrefutable. Isaiah was Arthur's biological son. Marcus's attorney tried to challenge the sample collection, suggested contamination, hinted at falsification. But the labs were respected institutions with no connection to the Whitmore family. The evidence held. Then came the revelation that shifted everything. Thomas presented documentation of Marcus's campaign against Isaiah and Renee. Private investigator receipts. Email chains coordinating the online attacks. Bank records showing payments to Isaiah's landlord to raise the rent. Phone logs proving Marcus had contacted QuickShip's corporate office to demand Isaiah's termination. Your Honor, Thomas said, Marcus Whitmore didn't just question his brother's legitimacy. He actively worked to destroy Isaiah and Renee Jackson. He orchestrated harassment, financial pressure, and character assassination, all while claiming to act in his father's best interests. Marcus shot to his feet. That's a lot. The judge banged his gavel. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore. This is ridiculous. I was protecting my family from obvious fraud. I said sit down. Arthur's attorney continued methodically presenting evidence. The coordination was undeniable. Marcus had weaponized his resources to eliminate a threat, crossing lines that went far beyond protecting family interests. Then came Arthur's recorded testimony. He'd taped it days earlier in case his health failed before the hearing. On screen, Arthur sat in his study, looking directly at the camera with clear, sharp eyes. No confusión. No manipulación. Just a man stating facts. I'm a sound mind. I know exactly what I'm doing. Isaiah Jackson is my son. His mother, Renee, was the woman I loved most in my life. I failed them both through cowardice and fear. Now I have a chance to do right by them. And no one, not my other children, not my business rivals, not anyone, will stop me from making amends. Arthur's voice grew stronger. I built Whitmore Industries on principles I've often failed to uphold. Integrity, fairness, justice. If my heirs cannot demonstrate those values, they don't deserve what I built. I invoke the forfeiture clause in my company charter. Any heir who acts with malice toward family members forfeits their inheritance. The courtroom erupted. Marcus and his siblings were shouting. Reporters frantically typed. The judge hammered for order. Isaiah sat frozen, watching his father on screen take a stand that would change everything. When order was finally restored, the judge reviewed the evidence methodically. The DNA results, the documentation of harassment, Arthur's clear, competent testimony. After 2 hours of deliberation, he delivered his ruling. The court finds that Isaiah Jackson is the biological son of Arthur Whitmore. The DNA evidence is conclusive and properly obtained. Furthermore, the court finds that Marcus Whitmore and his legal team engage in harassment and intimidation tactics against Isaiah Jackson and Renee Jackson. These actions demonstrate malice and bad faith. As such, the forfeiture clause Arthur Whitmore references is legally binding. Marcus Whitmore's inheritance claims are hereby nullified. Marcus's face went white. You can't do this. That clause was meant for corporate misconduct, not family disputes. The clause states any heir acting with malice. You hired investigators to harass your brother. You coordinated financial attacks. You weaponized resources to eliminate a perceived threat. That is malice, Mr. Whitmore. You brought this on yourself. The ruling continued. Arthur's other children, who'd participated less directly, would face reduced inheritances but not complete forfeiture. The foundation and charitable works would transfer to Isaiah's oversight. Arthur retained full control of his estate and company during his lifetime. Isaiah had won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like watching a family tear itself apart in public, like being the reason brothers and sisters now looked at each other with hatred. After the hearing, Arthur found Isaiah and Renee in a side room away from the media. He looked exhausted but relieved. It's done. You're protected now. Both of you. At what cost? Isaiah asked quietly. Your children hate you. Hate me. That forfeiture clause destroyed them. They destroyed themselves. I gave them every advantage in life, and they used it to hurt people. That's on them, not you. Arthur turned to Renee. I meant what I said in that video. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I let fear drive you away. I won't waste whatever time we have left. Renee's eyes filled with tears. Arthur, we can't just pick up where we left off. 20 years have passed. Well, but different people. Then we'll get to know these different people. Start over. Build something new. He looked at both of them. If you'll let me. The weeks after the hearing brought both closure and new beginnings. Arthur's health declined suddenly, the stress of the legal battle taking its toll. He had a minor stroke that landed him in the hospital, and for several days, the doctors weren't sure he'd recover. Isaiah sat vigil with his mother, both of them facing the reality that they'd only just found Arthur and might lose him again. But Arthur was stubborn. He fought back, regained his strength, and eventually came home to the mansion, moving slower but still sharp as ever. During his recovery, Isaiah made decisions about his future. He declined any executive role at Whitmore Industries. The company wasn't his world, and he had no interest in learning corporate politics. But the foundation, the part of Arthur's empire that funded scholarships and worker protections and community programs, that called to him. I want to help people like my mom and me, Isaiah told Arthur during one of their quiet afternoons together. People who work hard but can't get ahead because the system's rigged against them. That's what the foundation should focus on. Then make it so. It's yours now. Use it however you think best. Arthur smiled. You're already making better decisions than I did at your age. Isaiah kept his old quick-ship delivery jacket, hung it in his new apartment, a modest place he'd chosen himself despite Arthur's offers of something bigger. It reminded him where he came from, who he was before the portrait and the truth and the legal battles. The media eventually moved on to other scandals. Whitmore Industries stabilized. Marcus and his siblings faded from public view, bitter but powerless to change what had happened. The empire continued, but with new priorities driven by Isaiah's vision of what wealth should accomplish. Renee's health improved dramatically once the stress lifted. The treatment Arthur provided worked, and she was able to reduce her work hours, finally able to rest after decades of exhaustion. She and Arthur rebuilt their relationship slowly, carefully, two people learning to trust again after years apart. One afternoon, Isaiah returned to the mansion and found Arthur standing in the conservatory, looking at the portrait. The old man turned when Isaiah entered, and there was peace in his face that hadn't been there before. I'm donating this to a museum, Arthur said, gesturing to the portrait, with your mother's real name, her full story. She deserves to be remembered correctly. She'd like that. And you? Are you happy with how things turned out? Isaiah thought about the question. Happy wasn't quite right. Too much had been lost, too many years apart, too much pain between the discovery and the resolution. But he had a father now. His mother had closure, and he had resources to help people who'd struggled like they had. I'm content, Isaiah finally said. I didn't inherit a fortune. I inherited a truth, and I chose what to do with it. Arthur smiled. That's wiser than anything I could teach you. They stood together in the sunlight, father and son, separated by decades of missed time, but connected now by choice. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. People worked, struggled, dreamed. And somewhere in that city, a young person who needed help would get a scholarship funded by Isaiah's foundation, would find housing assistance or job training or medical support. The portrait would go to a museum where Renee's story would be told honestly. The young black woman who'd challenged a billionaire to do better, who'd walked away when staying became dangerous, who'd raised a son to be strong and principled and kind. Her legacy wasn't hidden anymore. Isaiah pulled out his phone and texted his mother. Come to the mansion when your shift ends. Family dinner tonight. She responded immediately. Arthur's cooking? God, no. I'm ordering in. But we should be together. Be there at 7. Isaiah pocketed his phone and looked at Arthur. "You're okay with that? Regular family dinners? Nothing fancy, just us." "I can't think of anything I'd want more." That evening, they sat around Arthur's enormous dining table, takeout containers spread between them, and talked about everything and nothing. Small stories and big plans. Renee told embarrassing stories about Isaiah as a kid, and Arthur shared memories of Renee challenging his board of directors. Isaiah talked about his ideas for the foundation, how to reach communities that needed help most. It was ordinary, simple, the kind of evening families everywhere shared without thinking about it. But for them, it was precious. Hard-won, built on truth instead of secrets. Later, after Renee had gone home and Arthur had retired to his room, Isaiah stood one last time in the conservatory. The portrait was already packed for transport to the museum. In its place stood an empty easel, waiting for whatever came next. Isaiah thought about the scared 19-year-old who'd delivered a package 3 months ago, who'd seen his mother's face in a stranger's home and asked a question that changed everything. That kid had been looking for answers. What he found was family, complicated and messy and real. The mansion felt less cold now, less like a museum and more like a place where people actually lived, where mistakes were acknowledged and growth was possible, where a delivery boy could become a son and a billionaire could learn that legacy wasn't about money hoarded but good done and truth told. Isaiah turned off the lights and headed home to his modest apartment, his delivery jacket hanging by the door as a reminder. He'd come from struggle. He'd found privilege. And he'd chosen to bridge that gap for others, to be the help he and his mother had needed all those years. That was his inheritance. Not billions in a bank account, but responsibility to use what he'd been given wisely. To be better than the circumstances that created him. To honor his mother's sacrifices by making sure other mothers didn't have to sacrifice as much. As he drove through the city, Isaiah passed quick-ship delivery vans making their rounds. He smiled, remembering the randomness of that morning assignment, the last-minute high-pay delivery that shouldn't have been his. One package, one portrait, one question. "Why is my mom's photo in your mansion?" The answer had torn apart a family and rebuilt it stronger, had exposed secrets and created new truths, had cost some people everything and given others a second chance. Isaiah didn't regret asking, didn't regret pushing for truth even when everyone told him to let it go, because truth mattered even when it was painful, especially when it was painful. He pulled into his parking spot, climbed the stairs to his apartment, and stood looking at that delivery jacket one more time. Tomorrow, he'd visit the foundation office and start implementing changes. Would interview applicants for scholarships and review proposals for community programs. Would do the work of turning wealth into actual help. But tonight, he was just Isaiah, a kid who'd asked a question and found father, who'd fought for his mother and won, who'd been given a choice between easy money and hard purpose, and chosen purpose every time. He lay in bed, thinking about Arthur alone in that big mansion, probably looking at old photos and remembering Renee as she'd been, thinking about his mother in her small apartment, finally able to rest without fear, thinking about Marcus and his siblings, learning that privilege without character meant nothing. And he thought about himself, the delivery boy who'd stumbled into a billionaire's life and changed it, who'd inherited not a fortune, but a foundation, not wealth, but responsibility. Isaiah smiled in the darkness. His mother had been right all along. Some truths hurt, but knowing them, facing them, choosing what to do with them, that was freedom. That was legacy. That was family. If you discovered tomorrow that your entire life was built on a carefully constructed lie meant to protect you, would you have the courage to demand the truth, even if it destroyed everything you thought you knew? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about truth, family, and the price of legacy.